My husband laughed about me at our anniversary dinner, and one sentence ended everything. But that came later. At first, it was just supposed to be dinner. Candles on the table, wine breathing in the glasses, the kind of evening people post about afterward and call perfect. We were celebrating 4 years of marriage, surrounded by friends, smiling couples, polite laughter filling the room like background music. And my husband loved an audience. I didn't know yet that he was already warming up, already deciding I'd be the punchline that would make everyone like him just a little more. My name is Renee, and before I go any further, if stories about women being underestimated, disrespected, and quietly pushed aside feel familiar to you, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because every story here is about what happens when silence finally runs out. And before the story truly begins, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? Now listen carefully, because everything I'm about to tell you happened in one evening, and none of it was accidental. The dining room smelled like rosemary and seared steak, the kind of smell that should have meant warmth, celebration, safety. Instead, it felt staged, like a set built for something I hadn't agreed to perform in. We had friends packed around the table, glasses clinking, conversations overlapping. I sat beside my husband, my back straight, my smile easy, already bracing in a way I didn't fully understand yet. I'd learned over time that when he drank, he performed. And when he performed, someone usually paid for it. So, someone across the table said casually, swirling their wine, "Anniversary question. How do you two keep the spark alive?" Harmless question. Normal question. I felt it before it happened. That small shift in the air. The way my husband leaned back, just a little too comfortably. The way his eyes scanned the table, counting reactions before he even spoke. He laughed loudly, confidently. The laugh that told everyone he thought he owned the room. "The spark," he said, lifting his glass. "Let me tell you about our love life." My fingers tightened around my fork. I said his name quietly, warning in my voice. He ignored me. He started talking, casually at first, then louder, warming up, layering detail the way comedians do when they feel the crowd leaning in. People laughed, some too loudly, some too quickly, the kind of laughter that tries to pretend something isn't wrong because admitting it would make things awkward. I kept my face still. I didn't give him the satisfaction. And with every word, something inside me stopped shrinking. Because while he thought he was embarrassing me, he was actually exposing himself. I hadn't planned what was about to happen. I hadn't rehearsed it. But the moment the room went quiet, and someone else spoke, everything changed. He leaned forward like he was sharing a secret, lowering his voice just enough to feel intimate, just enough to pull everyone closer. "My wife's idea of foreplay," he said, smiling, "is asking if I'm ready yet." Laughter rippled around the table. Not joyful laughter. Nervous laughter. The kind people use when they don't know where to put their discomfort. I felt heat rise in my face, but I kept my expression calm. Still. Controlled. He wasn't done. "And then it's just mechanical," he continued, waving his hand carelessly. "Like she's following instructions. Same routine, every time." I could set a timer. More laughter. Someone snorted. Someone else looked down at their plate. I stared at my fork and tasted metal, like I'd bitten my tongue without realizing it. He tapped his glass with a finger, pretending to think. "For minutes," he said. "Maybe 4.5 on a good night." This time, the laughter cracked. A few people didn't join in. A few shifted in their chairs. But no one stopped him. No one except one person. "Funny," a voice said from across the table. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm. Everyone turned. Shane sat there with his elbows near his plate, posture relaxed, eyes steady. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't drinking. He looked almost bored, like this whole performance was beneath him. "That's not true," he continued casually. "She's actually amazing." The room froze. It wasn't silence. It was shock. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone inhaled sharply. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and steady, like it was counting something down. My husband blinked once, then laughed, sharp and confused. "Excuse me," he said. Shane shrugged. "Just correcting the record." My husband's smile vanished. "I don't know what kind of joke you think you're making," he said, his voice dropping, "but you might want to rethink it." Shane took a slow sip of his drink. "Not joking. Personal experience." That was when the air truly shifted. My husband turned to me, his eyes searching my face, not for truth, but for control. "Renee," he said tightly, "tell me he's lying." I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd kissed my cheek that morning, at the man who'd laughed with friends while cutting me down, at the man who thought humiliation was harmless if it made him feel powerful. And I understood something with absolute clarity. He wasn't asking because he wanted the truth. He was asking because he needed me to save him. I blinked once and said calmly, evenly, "He's not lying." The room erupted. Gasps. A chair scraping back. Someone swearing under their breath. My husband went pale, then red, then pale again, like his body couldn't decide which emotion to land on. "You cheated on me?" he demanded. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "Same week you were staying late at work," I said softly. "Remember those nights?" His mouth opened, closed. But before he could say anything else, I lifted my hand just slightly. "Before you decide who I am," I said calmly, "before you turn me into whatever story helps you sleep tonight, let me explain something. Because that dinner wasn't the beginning. It was the endgame. And to understand why it unfolded exactly the way it did, you need to know what I discovered 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks earlier, Carter left his phone on the kitchen counter. That alone wouldn't have meant anything. We lived together. Phones got forgotten. Trust had once been so normal between us that the idea of snooping felt insulting. I wasn't snooping. I was rinsing a coffee mug when the screen lit up. Once. Then again. I glanced over without thinking, the way anyone does when light flashes in the corner of their eye. "Lena, work. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear that black thing again." My hand stilled around the mug. The ceramic clinked softly against the sink. Lena. A name I recognized. A coworker he mentioned too casually over the last few months. The one who really understood the pressure he was under. The one he stayed late with. The one who apparently needed wardrobe instructions. My brain did what it always did first. It tried to protect me. There has to be an explanation. There always is. Then the phone buzzed again. I picked it up, unlocked it, and stepped into a version of my marriage I didn't recognize. 6 months. 6 full months of messages scrolled past my thumb. Flirting. Photos. Hotel reservations. Lunches that bled into afternoons that disappeared entirely. Plans written like promises, not mistakes. But the cheating wasn't what hollowed me out. It was how he talked about me. "She's useful. She does everything around the house. Never complains." It's like having an obedient roommate who pays half the bills. My hands started shaking, but I kept reading. "She's boring as hell. Personality of a wet towel. I have to fake everything or she'd feel even worse." I sat down at the kitchen table without realizing it. Then I saw the sentence that changed something permanently inside me. I settled. She was stable. That's it. Not anger. Not hysteria. Clarity. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every plan. Sent them to myself. Deleted the sent history from his phone. Then I stood up, made breakfast, and kissed him goodbye like nothing had happened. He smiled at me that morning. Told me he loved me. I smiled back. That Monday on my lunch break, I called a lawyer. By Wednesday, I understood exactly where I stood. No kids. Clear evidence of adultery. Most assets protected. The house was mine from before the marriage. The car paid off in my name. The joint account barely held anything worth fighting over. The lawyer didn't soften it. "If you want this done quickly," she said, "you're in a strong position." I did want it done. Just not loud. Not yet. So I stopped reacting. And I started preparing. Because by then, I already knew something my husband didn't. He thought he was playing me, and he had no idea I'd already flipped the board. Once I stopped reacting, everything changed. I watched instead. Carter had no idea. He came home the same way he always did, tossing his keys on the counter, loosening his tie, complaining about work like he was carrying the weight of the world. And I listened, nodded, played my part, because once you know someone is lying to you, every word they say becomes data. That's when I noticed the shift. He started asking questions. Not emotional ones. Financial ones. "So, when do you hear back about that promotion?" he asked one night, swirling his wine like he wasn't pretending to be casual. "Did they mention bonuses, equity, anything long-term?" At the time, he framed it as support, pride, interest. Now I heard what it really was. Calculation. A few days later, he asked again. Then again. Same questions, different phrasing. Always about timing. Always about money. Always about when, never if. That's when the second realization landed. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was waiting to leave. And he was waiting for the most profitable moment to do it. I started gathering documents quietly. Bank statements. Deeds. Insurance papers. Passwords he assumed I'd never touch. I copied everything to a drive he didn't know existed and put it somewhere he'd never look. At the same time, I stopped sharing details about my work. I kept my answers vague, non-committal, the way he'd always spoken to me when he didn't want me asking questions. He didn't notice. He was too busy texting. Then on a Thursday morning, my phone rang. Not a text. A call. That alone told me it wasn't casual. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Maya Brooks. Carter's ex-girlfriend. The one whose name he always followed with a shrug and a dismissive, ancient history. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "Renee," she said immediately, skipping pleasantries. Her voice was tight, clipped. "Can you meet me?" "About what?" I asked. "Not over the phone," she said. "Now, if you can." We met at a diner 2 blocks from my office. Cheap coffee. Sticky vinyl booths. Neutral ground. Maya was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly, her untouched coffee cooling between her hands. "You already know," she said as soon as I sat down. "I do," I replied. "How long?" 3 weeks. She exhaled sharply, then nodded. "Smart." I waited. "Everyone at his office knows," she said quietly. "They've known for months. They joke about it. Happy hours. Lunches. It's treated like some cute workplace romance." My jaw tightened, but I didn't interrupt. "That's not why I called," she continued. "There's more." She slid her phone across the table. "Notes. Dates. Names." "He spoke to a divorce attorney," she said. 2 Tuesdays ago. Morning. He's waiting to file." "Waiting for what?" "For your promotion to finalize," she said. "Bigger salary. Bigger settlement." Everything clicked at once. The sudden enthusiasm. The questions about bonuses. The urgency about timing. He wasn't proud of me. He was positioning himself. Maya leaned forward. "I didn't come because I care about him," she said. "I came because I hate him." I believed her. Their breakup years ago hadn't been clean. He'd cheated then, too. That pattern was suddenly very clear. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I folded my hands in my lap and let the anger settle into something colder. Something useful. "I'm going to finish what he started," I said quietly. "Just not the way he expects." Maya's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile. Something sharper. "If you need anything," she said. "Proof. Names. Dates." "I will," I replied. And when I left that diner, I knew something with certainty. The clock had already started. Once you know someone is lying to you, everything becomes clear. Every smile turns into strategy. Every casual question becomes intent. Every touch feels rehearsed. I started watching Carter the way you watch an opponent once the rules of the game are finally obvious. That night, he came home in an unusually good mood. Too good. He hummed while kicking off his shoes, dropped his bag by the counter, wrapped his arms around me from behind like we were some picture-perfect couple. "Hey," he said brightly. "You look tired." "I am," I replied honestly. He didn't hear the warning in my voice. He never did. Over dinner, he talked about work pressure, about people not getting the recognition they deserved, about how loyalty was so rare these days. Then, right on cue, he steered the conversation exactly where he wanted it. "So," he said lightly, swirling his wine. "Any update on that promotion?" I chewed slowly. "Nothing official yet." His eyes flickered. "Just once." "Well, when it comes through," he said, smiling like a proud husband, "it'll be huge for us." "For us." I nodded. "Sure." Inside, something settled into place. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Maya's words, about the lawyer, about the messages where he called me useful, stable, obedient. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a resource. And resources, in his mind, were meant to be extracted. So I stopped hesitating. The next morning, I moved quietly. I changed passwords on everything that mattered. Backed up documents to an account he didn't know existed. Copied financial records, titles, insurance policies. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I moved like someone who finally understood the assignment. By Wednesday, I'd signed a lease on a small apartment across town. Temporary. Simple. Mine. Thursday, I scheduled movers for Saturday morning. Friday, I opened a new account and transferred my half of the joint savings into it. Carter noticed nothing. He was too busy texting. Maya stayed in the background, feeding me information when I asked. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She understood something important. Timing mattered more than emotion. And then I made the move he never saw coming. I called my boss. About the promotion, I said carefully. "I need some time." There was a pause on the line. "You're turning it down?" he asked. "For now," I said. "I need to reassess my priorities." When I hung up, my hands shook. Not from fear, from adrenaline. Carter was waiting for that promotion like a payout at the end of a heist. I'd just pulled the vault out from under him. That evening, he came home glowing. "I'm so excited for tomorrow," he said, slipping his arms around me. "Finally introducing you properly to everyone. Tomorrow, the anniversary dinner. The stage." I smiled into the sink where I was washing dishes. "Yeah," I said softly. "Should be interesting." By the time I went to bed that night, everything was in place. Financially, legally, emotionally, I was already gone. He just didn't know it yet. The morning of the dinner arrived calm, almost too calm. Carter kissed my cheek before leaving for work, the same quick, careless kiss he always gave, like checking something off a list. "Big night," he said, smiling. "Don't forget, this one matters." I smiled back. "I know." And I did. All day, I moved through my hours like everything was normal. Meetings, emails, polite conversations. No one at my office knew that by nightfall, my marriage would already be over. They just didn't know it yet. When I got home, I dressed carefully, not for him, for myself. Simple dress, nothing flashy, nothing that begged for attention. The kind of outfit that didn't need approval. I looked at my reflection once, steady, clear-eyed, and realized something surprising. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Guests started arriving just after 7. Laughter filled the room. Compliments floated toward Carter like currency. He soaked it in, played the perfect host, told the same polished stories he always did, adjusting details slightly, depending on who was listening. I watched quietly, waited. Dinner was served. Plates cleared. Wine poured again and again. Carter's voice grew louder, his confidence looser, his need for attention sharper. Then someone asked it. The harmless question, the one he'd been waiting for. "So," Jason said, grinning, "for years and how do you keep things exciting?" Carter didn't even look at me. He leaned back in his chair, glass raised, eyes sweeping the table like a man stepping onto a stage he'd rehearsed for. Oh, that's easy, he said. You lower your expectations. Laughter followed. And that was when I knew he wasn't going to stop. He talked. He joked. He performed. Each word sharper than the last. I stayed still, calm, silent. Because by then I understood something Carter never would. He thought humiliation gave him power. But power borrowed from cruelty doesn't last. And when the room finally went quiet, when the sentence that would change everything was spoken, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt free. He didn't stop. That was the part that surprised everyone else. But not me. Once Carter felt the room lean in, once he tasted that attention, he kept going. He always did. There was something hungry in him that never knew when to quit. She means well, he said, laughing, gesturing toward me with his glass. She really does. It's just not exactly memorable. A few laughs followed, weaker this time, uneasy. I looked around the table, faces shifting, smiles tightening, people realizing, too late, that this wasn't playful teasing. This was something else. I felt the moment stretch. And then the voice came, not loud, not sharp, calm. That's not true. Every head turned. Shane sat across the table, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed, like he hadn't just thrown a match into gasoline. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. Carter frowned. What? That's not true, Shane repeated evenly. She's actually amazing. The silence landed hard. Someone's fork slipped from their fingers and clinked against the plate. I could hear my own breathing, slow and steady, like my body already knew how this would end. Carter laughed, but it sounded wrong. Forced. Brittle. Very funny, he said. I don't know what kind of joke you think you're making. Not joking, Shane interrupted, taking a sip of his drink. Personal experience. That was it. The room stopped pretending. Carter's face shifted, confusion giving way to anger, then something darker. He turned toward me sharply, eyes locking onto mine. Renee, he said, voice tight. Tell me he's lying. Not asking. Demanding. I studied him for a moment. The man who'd mocked me in private texts. The man who'd reduced me to a resource. The man who'd just tried to make me smaller in front of everyone who mattered to him. He didn't want the truth. He wanted me to fix it. I set my glass down carefully and met his gaze. He's not lying, I said calmly. The room erupted. Gasps. Someone swore under their breath. A chair scraped back. Carter stood so fast his chair nearly toppled. You cheated on me? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. Same week you were staying late at work, I said quietly. Remember those nights? His mouth opened. Closed. Before he could regain control, I continued. And before you decide who I am, before you turn this into a story where you're the victim, let's be honest. I reached for the folder in the drawer beside me and placed it on the table. I saw your phone 3 weeks ago, I said evenly. 6 months of messages. Hotels. Plans. You calling me useful. Stable. Something you settled for. The room emptied fast after that. Apologies mumbled. Eyes avoided. Chairs scraping. People grabbing coats like they'd accidentally walked into a fire. When the door finally closed, only 3 of us remained. Carter, Shane, and me. Carter stared at the folder like it might bite him. You planned this, he said hoarsely. I nodded once. Yes. That was the moment his power finally broke. Carter's confidence didn't disappear all at once. It cracked. First, it turned into anger. This is my house, he said, voice rising, pacing the dining room like movement might give him authority again. You can't just ambush me like this. It's my house, I corrected calmly. My name. My deed. That stopped him. He turned toward me slowly, like the words hadn't landed the first time. You're bluffing. I opened the folder and slid 1 page across the table. Deed. Date. Signature. His face drained of color. You can pack a bag, I said evenly. Tonight. He laughed then. Sharp. Hollow. The laugh of someone reaching for disbelief because reality was too expensive. You're really doing this? Over one mistake. One mistake, I repeated quietly. I stood up. 6 months of cheating. I continued, calling me a placeholder, planning to wait until my promotion finalized so you could take more in the divorce. That's not a mistake. That's a strategy. His mouth opened, then closed again. Shane hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. He stood, nodded once at me, and left without drama, without explanation. His role was finished. Carter watched the door close like he'd just lost the last witness willing to stand on his side. "Renee," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "We can fix this. Counseling. Space. Whatever you want." I met his eyes. "You don't want me," I said calmly. "You want control back." That was when desperation slipped through the cracks. "I was stressed," he said quickly. "I didn't mean any of those messages. I was venting. Men talk like that." I tilted my head slightly. About women they respect. Silence. "You don't get to humiliate me in public," I continued, and then ask for privacy to clean it up. He looked around the empty room. The overturned chairs. The half-finished wine glasses. The performance that had collapsed without applause. "I'll change," he said. "No," I replied. "You'll repeat. Just not with me." He stared at me for a long moment, then his shoulders slumped. "Where am I supposed to go?" I picked up my phone. "You have 5 minutes." He flinched. "After that," I added calmly, "I call the police and tell them you're refusing to leave a property you don't own." That did it. He grabbed a bag from the bedroom, moving fast now, muttering under his breath. When he returned, he paused at the door, searching my face for something. Regret. Guilt. Permission. I gave him nothing. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Not a slam. A full stop. I locked it. Then I leaned back against it and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. The house was silent, not empty. Free. The silence after he left felt unreal, like the house itself was waiting for instructions. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still resting on the lock, listening for footsteps that never came. No shouting. No dramatic return. Just absence. And for the first time, it didn't scare me. I walked back into the dining room and looked at the table. Half-full glasses. Plates pushed aside. A centerpiece knocked slightly off-center from when he'd stood up too fast. Evidence of a performance that had ended badly. I didn't clean it up right away. I sat down instead. Because something important was happening inside me. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya. "Is he gone?" I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back. "Yes." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Good," she finally wrote. "You okay?" I thought about that. "I'm okay" used to mean I'm holding it together for everyone else. Now it meant something different. "I'm done," I typed. I blocked her number after that. Not out of anger, but because I understood something clearly now. She didn't help me because she cared about me. She helped because she wanted to watch him burn. And I wasn't interested in standing in anyone else's fire anymore. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because I was afraid of the bedroom, because I wanted to choose something new. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows like nothing had happened. Birds outside. Traffic in the distance. The world, unimpressed by personal earthquakes. At 9:30, my lawyer called. "I heard," she said simply. "You did." "These things travel fast," she replied. "Especially when they explode publicly." She didn't scold me. She didn't warn me. She just asked one question. "Is he out?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Then we move." By noon, the paperwork was in motion. Filing scheduled. Asset protection confirmed. Everything I'd prepared quietly now had momentum behind it. That afternoon, my phone rang again. "Jason." I almost didn't answer. Renee, he said, voice low. Have you heard about Carter? I leaned back against the counter. What about him? They fired him, he said. Like escorted out. Security and everything. I closed my eyes. What happened? HR got a report, he continued. Screenshots. Hotel receipts. Policy violations. It was bad. I knew exactly whose fingerprints were on that. Thanks for telling me, I said calmly. When the call ended, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt confirmation. That evening, I packed a small suitcase. Not because I was running, but because I wanted space. I booked a short stay across town, somewhere neutral, somewhere quiet. As I zipped the bag, I realized something that made me smile. For the first time, every decision I was making was mine. No audience, no approval, just clarity. And somewhere, probably pacing in a borrowed room with no job and no story left to sell, Carter was learning the difference between being admired and being respected. I checked into the hotel just before sunset. Nothing fancy. Clean lines. Quiet hallways. A place that didn't know me and didn't need to. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and stood by the window watching the city move without me. For years, I'd measured my safety by proximity to someone else. His schedule, his moods, his approval. Now I was alone, and I felt steadier than I ever had. My phone buzzed again. A number I hadn't saved. I already knew who it was. Carter. I didn't answer. The voicemail came anyway. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not angry, not charming, frantic. Renee, please, he said. I know I messed up, but this is getting out of control. I lost my job. I don't know what Maya did, but this isn't fair. You have to talk to me. I deleted the message without replaying it, because fairness had never been his concern when the power was his. The next morning, I met my lawyer in her office.
She didn't waste time.
She slid a folder across the table, neat, organized, final. He's scrambling, she said. Job loss complicates his position. It weakens his leverage. I'm not trying to hurt him, I said honestly. She looked at me over her glasses. You're not. You're protecting yourself. The difference matters. She outlined the next steps. Temporary separation. Asset freeze. Formal filing. All things I'd already prepared for, but hearing them spoken aloud made them real. When I left her office, I didn't feel heavy. I felt grounded. That afternoon, I returned to the house. Not to stay. To reclaim. I walked through each room slowly, deciding what was mine. Not just legally. Emotionally. Clothes I actually wore. Books I loved. Photos from before I'd started shrinking to fit someone else's life. I left the rest. That night, back at the hotel, I ordered room service and ate alone at the small table by the window. No conversation. No performance, just quiet. And in that quiet, something settled that surprised me. I wasn't grieving my marriage. I was grieving the version of myself who thought this was all she deserved. That realization hurt. But it also freed me, because once you see your worth clearly, you never negotiate it again. The days that followed moved faster than I expected. Emails, forms, confirmations. Everything Carter once handled because it was easier, now sat in front of me, clear, manageable, almost embarrassingly simple. I wondered how many years I'd been convinced I needed him for things I'd always been capable of doing myself. My lawyer called midweek.
He's pushing back, she said.
Claims the public scene damaged his reputation. I laughed softly. He did that himself. She agrees, she said. But he's panicking. He wants a meeting. No, I replied without hesitation. There was a pause. You don't want closure? I already have it, I said. That afternoon, I ran into Monica at the grocery store. She looked startled when she saw me, like she hadn't expected me to exist outside that dinner. Renee, she said awkwardly. I'm so sorry about everything. I met her eyes calmly. You don't need to apologize. Yes, I do, she insisted.
We laughed.
I laughed. I didn't know what to do. I know, I said gently. That's why I'm not angry. She swallowed. You were impressive. That night. I smiled, not proudly, not bitterly. I was done. That night, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered this one. Renee, Carter said quietly. No anger. No bravado. Just fatigue. I just want to understand how this happened. I leaned back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. It didn't happen suddenly, I said. You just stopped noticing me a long time ago. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I know, I replied. You just didn't care enough not to. Silence stretched. I miss you, he said finally. I closed my eyes. You miss the version of me who made your life easier. He didn't deny it. I hope you figure things out, I added. But not with me. I hung up and blocked the number. Not out of anger, but because some doors are meant to stay closed once you walk through them. The next morning, I woke up lighter. Not happy yet. Not healed completely, but certain. Certain that my life was no longer something happening to me. It was something I was choosing. I moved back into the house a week later. Not because it felt familiar,
but because it felt empty in the right way.
The echoes were different now. No tension hiding in corners. No waiting for keys in the lock. Just space. Honest, quiet space. I opened the windows first thing. Let air move through rooms that had learned to hold their breath. I packed away things that didn't belong to me anymore, not angrily, not ceremonially, just deliberately. My lawyer called that afternoon. He's officially agreed to mediation, she said. He doesn't want court. That's smart, I replied. It is, she agreed. And Renee, you should know this. He's asking about reconciliation again. I almost laughed. No, I said simply. Good, she replied. Then we proceed cleanly. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, not working, just thinking. For the first time, I wasn't trying to solve anything. I wasn't anticipating someone else's needs. I was just present. The next morning, I went back to work, not as someone bracing for questions, but as myself. A few colleagues pulled me aside quietly, offered awkward sympathy. Others just treated me normally, which I appreciated more than they knew. And then my boss called me into his office. I want to revisit the promotion, he said. If you're ready. I considered it carefully. I am, I said. Not because I needed to prove anything. Because I wanted it. That night, alone in my house, I cooked dinner for one and sat at the table without distraction. No background noise. No scrolling. Just food, warmth, and the realization that solitude wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. And somewhere, in an apartment that wasn't his, with a job that was gone and a future he hadn't planned for, Carter was learning a lesson he'd never thought applied to him. You don't get to break someone quietly and expect them to stay silent forever. The promotion meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. 2 days felt like a lifetime. I didn't tell Carter. I didn't tell anyone. This time, the win was mine alone. Thursday night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety. From anticipation. I kept replaying versions of my life in my head, the one where I stayed careful and quiet, and the one I was finally stepping into. By morning, the choice felt settled, like a door that had already closed behind me. When I walked into my boss's office, he didn't waste time. We should have done this sooner, he said, sliding the folder toward me. You've been carrying more than we realized. I opened it slowly. Title change. Salary increase. Clear authority. No strings. No hesitation. I signed without shaking. As I stood to leave, he added something unexpected. You know, he said, when people underestimate you, it's usually because you made them comfortable doing it. That landed deeper than he probably intended. That afternoon, Carter's lawyer emailed mine. He wanted to move mediation up. Urgent. My lawyer called immediately.
He's panicking, she said.
He heard about the promotion. I smiled. Then let him, I replied. Mediation took place the following week in a neutral office downtown. Carter arrived late, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged to a better version of his life. He avoided my eyes. I didn't avoid his. When the numbers were laid out, he went quiet. The house. Mine. Savings. Divided cleanly. No claim on my future income. He tried once. This feels extreme, he said carefully. All over one night. I leaned forward slightly. No, I said calmly. This is over every night you thought I would notice. The mediator didn't look up.
She didn't need to.
Carter signed. So did I. When it was done, he lingered, like someone waiting for a final line, a last chance to rewrite the ending. I gathered my papers and stood. Renee, he said softly, you've changed. I met his eyes one last time. No, I said. I stopped shrinking. I walked out without looking back. And for the first time since that dinner, the story wasn't about him anymore. Life didn't slow down after mediation. It clarified. The noise faded, and what was left felt sharp, clean, intentional. I stopped waking up with that familiar heaviness in my chest, the one that came from constantly measuring myself against someone else's moods. Now, mornings belonged to me. Coffee tasted better when no one was watching how much I poured. Silence felt lighter when it wasn't punishment. The promotion became official the following Monday. New responsibilities, new meetings, new expectations. And not one of them felt like a burden. I'd already been doing the work. The title just caught up. A few coworkers looked at me differently now. Not with pity, with respect. That shift mattered more than the raise. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. I heard what you did at the dinner. I paused. You didn't deserve that, the message continued. I wish I'd said something too. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back. It mattered that someone finally did.
I didn't ask who it was.
Some apologies don't need names. That evening, I went home and stood in the doorway of the house, really seeing it for the first time.
Not as a shared space.
Not as a stage. As mine. I rearranged furniture. Took down photos that no longer represented me. Opened drawers I'd ignored for years. I found pieces of myself tucked away in small places. A notebook from before I was married. Ideas I'd shelved. Goals I'd convinced myself were unrealistic. I sat on the floor and read until the light faded. Later that night, my lawyer called one last time. Everything's finalized, she said. You're free. Free. Not divorced, not single. Free. I hung up, turned off my phone, and opened the windows. Cool air rushed in, carrying the quiet promise of something new. And as I lay in bed that night, I realized something that would have terrified the old version of me. I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready for it. The first weekend alone felt strange. Not empty, just unfamiliar. I woke up early out of habit, then realized I didn't have to rush. No schedules to manage. No moods to anticipate. No one waiting for me to make the day easier for them. I made coffee slowly and stood by the window, watching the city stretch awake. Cars moved. People hurried. Life went on, indifferent to endings and beginnings alike. For the first time, that didn't bother me. Around noon, my sister stopped by. She'd followed everything quietly, checking in without pressing, respecting the distance I'd needed. She looked around the house, then back at me. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. She smiled. Lighter. We spent the afternoon talking about things that had nothing to do with Carter. Travel. Work. Small plans I'd once dismissed as impractical. She didn't ask if I was dating. She didn't ask if I was lonely. She understood something without needing it explained. That evening, after she left, I sat at the dining table where everything had exploded weeks earlier. Same table. Same chairs. Completely different energy. I ran my hand over the wood and realized I didn't feel anger anymore. Not satisfaction either. Just distance. My phone buzzed once. A notification from work confirming my new role had gone live internally. Congratulatory messages followed.
Short.
Professional. Respectful. No one framed it as survival. No one called me brave. They called me capable. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams. No replaying conversations. Just rest. And in that rest, a quiet truth settled in me. I didn't win because I exposed him. I won because I chose myself when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That choice didn't make me loud. It made me free. The next chapter didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, quietly, almost shyly. I was halfway through reviewing emails when my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I didn't recognize. A lunch invite. No subject line. Just a name I hadn't seen in years. Shane Mercer. I stared at it longer than I meant to. He hadn't reached out since the dinner. No follow-up. No explanation. He'd spoken one sentence, changed everything, and disappeared like it was never about him to begin with. I almost declined. Not because I was uncomfortable, because I didn't want confusion where I'd finally built clarity. But curiosity won. We met at a small cafe near the river. Neutral. Quiet. No history attached to the walls. Shane stood when I arrived, polite, measured, nothing like the dramatic version people had started whispering about. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. "You didn't have to," I replied, sitting down. "I wanted to," he said, "but I didn't want to assume." I appreciated that more than he knew.
We talked easily.
About work, about the city, about how strange it feels when your life becomes dinner table gossip for people who never earned the right to know you. He didn't ask invasive questions. He didn't frame himself as a hero. At one point, I asked the question that had been sitting quietly between us. "Why did you speak up?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Because I've watched men like him do that for years," he said calmly. "And I've watched rooms stay silent. I didn't want to be part of that silence." That was it. No romance, no ownership, just principle. When we stood to leave, he smiled softly. "Whatever comes next for you," he said, "you handled it with strength." "Thank you," I replied, "for saying one sentence." He shook his head. "You did the hard part." As I walked back toward my office, I felt something surprising. Not attraction, not longing. Closure. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new document. No title, no plan, just a blank page waiting. I didn't fill it with anger or explanations. I filled it with intentions. What I wanted. What I wouldn't tolerate again. What kind of life felt honest to me now. I wasn't rebuilding ruins. I was designing something new. And this time, I wasn't asking anyone else what it should look like. The city felt different after that lunch. Not because anything around me had changed, but because I had. I noticed how often I'd rushed in the past, how much of my energy had gone into anticipating reactions instead of trusting my own decisions. Now I moved slower, more deliberately, like I finally owned my time. Work settled into a rhythm that felt natural. Meetings where my voice didn't shake. Decisions that didn't require permission. People listened when I spoke, not because I demanded it, but because I no longer apologized for taking up space. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I passed a group laughing in the lobby. For a brief second, my body reacted automatically, that old instinct to brace, to shrink. Then it passed. I wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. That weekend, I did something I'd put off for years. I went through my old emails, not to reread pain, but to delete it. Threads where I'd explain myself too much. Messages where I'd soften my words to keep the peace. Apologies that never should have been written in the first place. I deleted them all, one by one, feeling lighter with every click. Sunday morning, I walked through a local market, hands full of flowers I didn't need a reason to buy. A woman nearby laughed loudly, unapologetically. I caught myself smiling at the sound, not out of envy, but recognition. I could be that woman. That evening, my sister called. "I ran into Carter," she said carefully. My chest tightened for half a second, then relaxed. "How is he?"
"Tired," she said.
Smaller. "He asked about you." I waited. I told him you're doing well, she added, and that he doesn't get access to your life anymore. I smiled. Thank you. After the call, I sat quietly, realizing something important. His story had stopped intersecting with mine, not because I shut it down aggressively, but because I'd outgrown it. That night, as I turned off the lights and got into bed, a thought settled gently into place. Strength doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes, it looks like peace. The invitation arrived in the mail, not by email. Heavy paper, carefully written, deliberate. A small professional conference downtown. Women in leadership. Panels, workshops, networking. The kind of thing I used to skim past, telling myself I didn't have time or that it wasn't really for me. This time, I registered without overthinking it. The morning of the conference, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not fixing flaws. Just checking in. I liked the woman looking back at me. She looked grounded, awake. The room buzzed with conversation when I arrived. Women exchanging stories, ideas, frustrations, victories. No competition. No performances. Just presence. I took a seat near the back and listened. One speaker talked about confidence, not the loud kind. The kind that comes from knowing when to walk away. Another spoke about boundaries. How people resist them not because they're unfair, but because they change the rules. I felt seen in ways I hadn't expected. During a break, a woman approached me. Mid-40s.
Calm.
Curious eyes. I heard you speak up at a dinner once, she said lightly. People still talk about it. I smiled politely. That wasn't the point. I know, she replied. That's why it mattered. We talked for a few minutes. About work. About timing. About how life can quietly corner you if you let it. Before she left, she said something that stayed with me. You remind people what's possible. That evening, walking home through the city, I thought about that sentence. I hadn't set out to be an example. I just refused to be diminished. At home, I placed the conference badge on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a marker. Proof that the world was opening in different ways now. And for the first time, I wasn't rushing toward the next chapter. I was letting it arrive. The message came late that night, just as I was getting ready for bed. Unknown number. One sentence. I saw you today. You looked happy. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening for half a second before relaxing again. I didn't need to ask who it was. Some instincts don't disappear. They just learn when not to react. I didn't reply. That alone felt like progress. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a long walk before work. The city felt softer at that hour, like it wasn't demanding anything yet. I passed cafes opening their doors, people setting up their days, lives quietly unfolding without needing permission.
I realized something then.
Happiness wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It showed up when you stopped negotiating your worth. At the office, my calendar was full, but nothing felt overwhelming. During a meeting, someone deferred to my opinion without hesitation. Not because I insisted, but because they trusted me. I spoke clearly, decisively, without that familiar urge to soften my words. Afterward, a colleague pulled me aside. You have a presence now, she said. Like you're not asking to be here. I smiled. I'm not. That evening I hosted dinner. Not a performance. Not an anniversary. Just a few people I trusted. Simple food. Easy conversation. Laughter that didn't cost me anything. When someone asked about my past, I didn't flinch. It ended, I said simply. And something better started. No details. No explanations. Later, after everyone left, I stood in the quiet kitchen, looking around the room that once held so much tension. Now it felt neutral.
Honest.
Fine. I washed the dishes slowly, feeling a sense of closure that didn't need an audience. Because the truth was simple. The dinner that was meant to humiliate me had done the opposite. It showed me exactly who I was and who I would never be again. The morning after that dinner party, I woke up smiling. Not the polite kind. Not the practiced kind. The real one. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, warm and quiet, like it was congratulating me for surviving something I'd once thought would destroy me. I stood there barefoot, coffee in my hands, and thought about how strange life is. One sentence at a dinner table had cracked everything open, but it hadn't broken me. It had revealed me. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who laughed softly when she was uncomfortable, who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who thought love meant endurance. I didn't judge her. She did what she needed to do to survive. But she didn't need to survive anymore. That afternoon, I walked through the city without rushing. No destination. No urgency. Just movement. I passed couples arguing, friends laughing, strangers lost in their own stories. And for the first time, I didn't feel behind. I felt aligned. My phone buzzed once. A message from my lawyer confirming the final filing date.
Clean.
Straightforward. Almost boring. Perfect. That night, I sat alone at the same table where I'd once been humiliated, now covered in fresh flowers and an open notebook. I wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. I am not who I was when I tolerated less. And then I closed the notebook. Because some chapters don't need more words. Now I want to ask you something. Which moment in this story stayed with you the longest? Was it the silence at the table, the sentence that changed everything, or the quiet morning afterward when freedom finally felt real? Tell me in the comments. And if stories about women reclaiming their power, their voice, and their lives matter to you, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay here with us. Because it's never too late to choose yourself.